Well, here we are finally at the end of the year, and more or less everything I'm gonna play has been played. And with all the yammering about games I've done this year, it wouldn't be right to let it end without giving you a rundown of what I think were the best games of 2022. So what I'm gonna do is give you my top 5 games of 2022 in order from number 5 to number 1. And of course, I'll provide some reasoning for why things are where they are in comparison to other things on the list and just all games in general, but I'll try to keep that reasoning fairly brief so that we don't end up with 5 reviews in one video and suddenly the video is an hour long. So yes, let's get started, but before we get directly into the main top 5, there's gotta be an honorable mention. Just shy of the top 5, the 6th man award, if you will. For me, it goes to Pokemon Legends Arceus. This game's in a weirdly unique situation where I feel like it gets a bit too much credit from the dedicated Pokemon fan base, but a little too little credit from the casual audience. Whatever the case though, Pokemon Legends is just an overall enjoyable experience, and where I think it doesn't get its due is in the innovation department, because Game Freak literally just invented a genre here. It doesn't play like the normal Pokemon games. Yes, there are turn-based battles in the game, but that's not the focus. That's not what the loop of the game is centered around. It's centered on catching the Pokemon without battling and catching them multiple times. And there isn't another game, Pokemon or otherwise, that plays like Pokemon Legends Arceus. And it's not just that the game is different. What's important is that they managed to make different fun. So that's my honorable mention, Pokemon Legends. And now let's get into the real true top 5. And we're gonna start with something that's gonna get me yelled at right from the off. Coming in as my number 5 is Elden Ring. Shock, horror, gasp. How could this idiot waifu collector think 4 different games were better than Elden Ring this year? Well, let me be clear. This is my top 5. So everything on here I think is at the very least a really good game. But yes, Elden Ring is my number 5. And while I do want to mostly focus on the positives of all these games, because this is more of a celebratory video than anything else, because of the immense popularity of this game, I do sorta have to over-explain why it's here in an attempt to defend myself, I guess. To try to keep things somewhat short, I'd say first that I don't really think Elden Ring did anything too revolutionary or inventive when it comes to open world as a genre, even though it often gets that accolade. I get that the change that people often hold up is the lack of direction, sort of a less is more type of thing, like the fact that you don't really know where you're going was actually an enhancement. But I don't think that that's what makes Elden Ring's open world shine. I actually think that's one of the bigger detriments of the game, and Elden Ring manages to be great in spite of it. But in reality, what makes Elden Ring's open world great is the fact that it's filled with interesting and worthwhile things. It's really that simple. When you're in a time where there are so many soulless open worlds being pushed out that feel filled with repetitive, samey activities that often feel checklisty, where you're doing things for the sake of saying you did it rather than any sense of fun or enjoyment. When you've been playing a ton of games that are like that, which a lot of us have, and Elden Ring comes along with a world clearly crafted to be enjoyed rather than keep you busy, it stands out, even if they don't achieve that enjoyment at every single corner. However, of course, this game has more than its fair share of cheap encounters in it too, because, you know, when you build a reputation for making tough games, it can be hard to find that balance between unfairly battering the player into the ground and providing a good challenge. And I honestly think a lot of the fights unfortunately lean into the unjust battering of the player, where of course it's not unbeatable, but it's very unlikely that you win on the first, fifth, even 10th time sometimes, because it's just that far from being fair, you know? Sort of like how old arcade games would basically force you to lose to get more quarters out of you, except here, there are no quarters, so I guess it's just so the devs can be dicks, I don't know. And a lot of those unjust battles come late in the main quest line, not to mention the main quest line kind of goes on for too long, but yeah, a bunch of those bosses and enemies are just painful slogs to get through. The Fire Giant, the Godskin Duo, Malakath are all just a chore, and they're, you know, while they provide a good spectacle, they're not exactly well-designed fights. I mean, at around level 60 or so, you can beat Elden Ring. And Malakath is the third to the last boss or something like that. But when I was at level 200 or so, Malakath could still two-shot me. And I had high health. So just why? You know, why 140 levels beyond the recommended level can this guy still kill me in 2 hits? And, you know, it's because FromSoft games have like this weird pseudo arbitrary leveling, and I don't know, man, some of it's kind of a mess. And I've heard people try to defend Malakath specifically and say stuff like, well, Malakath's a glass cannon, but it's not true. He takes damage at about the same rate as the boss who comes after him, only that boss can't kill me in 2 hits, so there goes that theory. But that's the thing about Elden Ring. Through all its bullshit and questionable design choices, you kinda wanna power through and soldier on because there's so much to play with, so much build variety and stuff to discover that's genuinely interesting. And doesn't feel like you always know what's gonna happen. Even when encountering something similar to what you've already seen, you're still never really sure. That's the good part about the game being a dick to you. You're always going, well, what the fuck's gonna happen? The way the open world in particular is crafted is very reminiscent of Skyrim structurally, and that's high praise. But initially, the game stands so firm on being a dick to your low-level character that it's hard to enjoy. But I felt once you get to a point where you're exceedingly powerful, the game and the world are so much more open, so much more inviting, and can really be taken in and explored and enjoyed the way I honestly think the devs want them to be. Because in Elden Ring, exceedingly powerful doesn't mean invincible like it would in a lot of games. Even beyond level 300, you can still be killed relatively easily if you're not careful. And of course, there's the caveat that being that powerful and enjoying the game in that way takes tens of hours to even have the option of doing. And I can't very well tell people, well, if you just wait 30 to 60 hours, the game will become the most fun thing you've played since Skyrim. I mean, I can tell them that because it's true, but I can't act like play 30 hours is a reasonable thing to ask people to do to get some enjoyment. And I think this is my conclusion. Those first 30 to 60 hours that it's gonna take you to beat the game, depending on how much you explore, are gonna be a drawn out, frustrating time in a beautifully crafted open world that'll ultimately make for a rough around the edges but overall decent experience. And if you stick with it beyond that, it will evolve into one of the best and most memorable experiences you've had in the last decade. So it's kind of like, it's a 10 out of 10 if you play 80 hours, which in my eyes then makes it not a 10, but still a really good game. Okay, that was the longest explanation I'll have for the placement of any of these games. It's over now, so I hope that all made sense for you. And remember, it's just my opinion. So yeah, let's finally move on to my number 4. And you guys are about to get so mad at me. It's Cult of the Lamb. What the fuck? Cult of the Lamb above Elden Ring? This man's a fucking idiot. I know. Hold your boos until the end. The thing is, I'm just taking all these games for what they are and what they're trying to do individually. I'm not judging Elden Ring based on its lack of farming mechanics, and I'm not judging Cult of the Lamb based on how good its open world is, because then both games are zeros. I'm just looking for, what is your game trying to do? Are they good ideas? How well do you execute those ideas? And how much fun is it? And I hear you saying, but you can play Elden Ring for hundreds of hours. Well, if sheer runtime to see everything was the end-all be-all, then a lot of these bloated, soulless games would actually be the best. Or even if your own playtime was the deciding factor for some reason, then we'd probably all just have multiplayer live service games as our number ones because we spend more time on those, just socializing with our friends, if nothing else. You've probably got more time on Fortnite than Elden Ring. But anywho, back to Cult of the Lamb. This game is just a phenomenal little mixture of two genres that just seem so obvious to put together after you play this game. It obviously doesn't have the budget of a big AAA game, and so some people might assume that it really isn't up to snuff in comparison, but that's not true at all. And ironically, Cult of the Lamb makes its mark sort of in the opposite way of our previous entry. That is to say that Cult of the Lamb does a great job of being very accessible, even while incorporating a notoriously somewhat frustrating genre like roguelikes. You know, by dialing back the punishment and disregard for your time, along with pairing it alongside a cute little management sim, Cult of the Lamb manages to put the roguelike genre in a whole new light. If you want to hear me talk about it in a bit more detail, I did do a Cult of the Lamb video back when the game came out, but for now, I've basically extended this video several minutes by having an entire Elden Ring review, so let's just move on to number 3, huh? And my number 3 best game of 2022 is A Plague Tale Requiem. And yee doggy. This game is fucking great. Went a little western real quick. The game's that good, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, this game is one of the unsung heroes of this year. And let me tell you something. I know God of War Ragnarok won Best Narrative at the Game Awards, but this is the best narrative. A Plague Tale Requiem. It executes an incredibly engaging story to a satisfying conclusion. Even the shift to more aggressive gameplay options is backed up narratively and tonally. And admittedly, while the gameplay isn't a complete revolution, it at least presents a compelling case for why fully dedicated stealth games shouldn't fall off the face of the earth like they have been lately. And I know I spoke about Requiem having more aggressive options a second ago, but even with those options implemented and catered to, you're still never fully free of having to approach situations with tact and caution. You're more so encouraged to pick your moments of open aggression and blend them into your stealthy approach. It's a tightrope walk that's pulled off very well in this game. So at its core, yes, it's a stealth game like you understand stealth games to be, but its precision, the specificity, and the validity that A Plague Tale brings to the genre, paired with a fantastic story, and voila, you've got a great fucking game on your hands. But now let's go ahead and move on to number 2. And I'll be honest, 2 and 3 are iffy for me. You can flip these depending on the day, but for the sake of this list, I've chosen concrete positions. My number 2 game is Horizon Forbidden West. A game that is strangely underrated, as wild as that may sound, because the game comes up and everybody's like, oh yeah, Horizon is a cool game, but anyway, and I'm like, no, not but anyway. Forbidden West is so much more pristine, so much more well executed, so much more unique than the majority of everything this year, and so much more refined than the first game, Horizon Zero Dawn. And I think that's why this game is underrated. The fact that it is a bigger and better refined edition of the first game. But there is a limit to how far you can just do the same thing but bigger and better before you've gone as far as possible and now need substantial change to keep things fresh. That threshold was reached with Horizon Forbidden West because it refined and built upon everything already existing to an astonishing point. So now there's nowhere else to go, nothing else to do but change. The issue is, a lot of people treated Forbidden West like the threshold had been hit in Zero Dawn, when in fact, it definitely had not been. Forbidden West, in my opinion, even enhances the story of the first game by giving meaning to what originally seemed like an unnecessarily convoluted explanation of the world. And now with the addition of Forbidden West, what came off as meaninglessly complicated is revealed to be a foundation that sets the stage for a surprisingly wider universe revealed later on. I don't know, man. I just think the leap in quality from Zero Dawn to Forbidden Forbidden West is underappreciated, but it's not lost on me at least. So that's my number 2. And now, my friends, it's time for my number 1 game of 2022. You might have already guessed it. My number 1 game of 2022 is God of War Ragnarok. Oh, and yeah, go ahead, cue the Sony fanboy comments since I've got Horizon at number 2 and God of War at number 1. But hey, feel how you feel and call me what you will. Now back to God of War. I mean, what's to be said? No other game this year executed like this one, in my opinion. I mean, just the way this game feels so in line with the first game, but so decidedly different, is already such an achievement. And for Ragnarok to maintain an overall great story while elevating the gameplay side of things by an astronomical degree, it's just so fucking satisfying. The variety of the gameplay, the expertly doled out open areas and side missions, the satisfying end, Ragnarok is just put together so well in a way that I don't think anything else from this year is. And that is a Cliff Notes version of why God of War Ragnarok is my game of the year. But there you have it, my top 5 games of 2022. And remember, at the end of the day, all of this is subjective. My opinion or interpretation or perception is not the end all be all. But having said that, I know some of you can't contain how much of a horrible person you are, so feel free to tell me how stupid and wrong I am in the comments. Or, if you're just a normal, cool person with a different opinion, I'd love to see your top 5 games of 2022 in the comments. You know, maybe you've got all different games. All 5 of your games are games that are not on this list. Or maybe you've got the exact same 5, but in a completely different order. Whatever the case, let me know. I'm very interested to see it, but that's all from me for now. So until next time, I am Waifu Collector. I am just a normal guy. I like hentai, and I clearly like video games. Goodbye.